Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our ad hoc budget committee meeting. We'll start the meeting this evening with a land acknowledgement from Mr. Fisher. Go ahead, Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. We are gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between the Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Métis, and Inuits people, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none. We should maybe, if there's any questions from the December 14th meeting. You have a summary of the December 14th meeting if there's any questions or comments from that. And seeing none, we'll get into our agenda with the first report, which is the operating summary, and that'll be Mr. Romney.
Thank you, Chair Armstrong. This report outlines the unaudited statements for the 2020 year. As we know, COVID-19 has had its fiscal pressures on the township in several areas, such as recreation revenue and investment income. As noted in the report, the overall deficit was $366,000, which is smaller than the originally forecasted deficit of roughly $500,000. Cost containment measures established across your organization and natural cost savings assisted in reducing the overall impact due to COVID-19 fiscal pressures. In an effort to offset the aforementioned deficit, $165,000 of Safe Restart funding was allocated to ensure the dedicated infrastructure levy was transferred to reserve, while the remaining budgeted transfer to reserve funds were offset to assist in 2020 operations. The remainder of the Safe Restart funds received from the province will be utilized towards the COVID-19 specific capital expenditures noted in the next report, with the remainder of the funds being utilized towards the 2021 operating budget process. The total anticipated transfer amongst the three core infrastructure reserve funds is $161,000, which is, as mentioned before, the dedicated transfer to the infrastructure levy. And distribution to these reserves will be found on the third report this evening. Outside of the general levy, user pay departments, excluding building due to permit activity, exceeded budgeted transfer to reserve expectations due to cost savings net of revenues. Attached to the report includes the statement of operations with the various note disclosures, and staff are here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Councillor Fisher.
Yes, through you, Mayor Armstrong. On the first page of the investment income, under investment income, are there any other safe options for investment income that would give us a better rate of return other than bank interest? And I'm not talking Bitcoin, but is there any other options at all?
Mr. Kelly, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, through you, Mayor Armstrong. So yes, there are other options. We're obviously limited based on being a municipal government on where we can invest. The Corporate Services Department, I guess myself, I've been investigating options through the One Investment Fund, which is run by LAS, Local Authority Services, which is a subsidiary of AMO, and CHUMS, which is a subsidiary of the Municipal Finance Officers Association. So I've been monitoring that closely. They do have a high interest savings account option. I did look at it a few times this year, given the fact that we had some funds not being spent because of deferrals of capital activity and cost containment pieces, that the return on the high interest savings account was actually below what we are currently receiving through our general bank account at TD. When it is advantageous for us to invest in other money market instruments, we'll put them into term deposits, short-term term deposits around 90 days up to 365 days, just in the event that we do need access to the cash. The other piece that is an option, which is not something we're pursuing at this point in time, is the prudent investment standard. It takes a significant amount of work to qualify for it for municipalities. There's currently 6 across the entire province of Ontario that are investing under the prudent investment standard. This allows you to invest in options outside of general banks and money market instruments and get into bonds, et cetera, things that are a little more have a risk to them, but also have a higher yield. So this year, you'll see it in the work program in 2021 from Corporate Services. We're looking to update the township's investment policy, looking to open up access to the one investment fund, and those 2 options being the high interest savings account and the prudent investment standard when it's advantageous for us to do so. But I think that's a pretty good summary of the options we have out there, and we can continue to update you on that as it comes forward.
Councillor Gordick.
Sorry about that, guys. Just trying to unmute myself. Just a quick one. I just wanted to clarify one of the costs with on line 33 with regards to parks. My pages aren't numbered, so I can't tell you the page, but it is number 33 with regards to parks. And it mentions that there was an emergency lighting installation for 6,000. Just confirming, is that where we had asked for the emergency lighting to be put into the parking lot at the admin complex? Just clarification for that.
I saw you, I read your lips there, Mayor. So I saw you call my name. Yes, actually that was a requirement in the washrooms at the admin building for emergency lighting that had not been, that needed to be installed based on an inspection from earlier in the year or previous year. So it was not related to the parking lot.
Okay, thank you. And then follow up on that. It mentions that we are about 20,000 over in expenses for parks. And on that line 33, it mentions about 10. What would be the other 10 approximately that was over? That's not listed in that line, just for a question.
I'm not sure if Mr. Kelly has the detail on that line. You said line 33.
Well, the explanation is line 33. Sorry, guys. It's just
sure. No, that's no problem. So I believe what Councillor Gordick's referring to is the summary of spending at municipal facilities. So this is actually not including parks. So that would include our administration complex, the libraries where we have to spend on those. So the other 10,000, I know we did have additional costs within the admin complex itself this year that we took advantage of the closure of this building to get some works completed that otherwise would really interrupt services. One being a painting project that was done in here, which is within the threshold that can be approved at myself and Mr. Whittington's level. So we got that done as well as I believe HVAC inspection was completed for this building to prepare us for that larger HVAC project that's coming up in the 2021 budget.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. On page 16.2, a question for Jeff. Can you comment on what the increased activity was that you were talking about there?
Through you, Chair Armstrong, the increased activity being mentioned there for hardtop and loose-top roads would be in relation to pothole work and patching work for hardtop roads, as well as maintenance for loose top roads. So essentially, these are lines that, or these are budget lines that address minimum maintenance standards.
I see no further questions. So we have a recommendation that report COR 2021-01 prepared by the Manager of Finance / Deputy Treasurer regarding the 2020 operating budget versus actual for the year ended December 31st, 2020, unaudited, be endorsed. That is moved by Councillor Gordick, Councillor Hallman. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And the next item is the capital review. Mr. Romney.
Thank you, Chair Armstrong. This report outlines the capital program status as of 2020 year end. As noted in the report, 45 projects were completed, leaving 62 projects to be carried forward into the 2021 year, with several of them being deferred due to COVID-19, as noted in prior capital reports in the 2020 year. With these completed projects, approximately $19,000 will be returned to the Township 3 dedicated infrastructure reserve funds from the general levy perspective. So through this, with the closure of the projects, this leaves approximately $8.5 million of approved funds that have yet to been expended. So this primarily attributes to the employment land project, which is just over $3 million. So attached to the report, you'll find the capital statements with various comments from each department, and staff are here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Armstrong. It's safe to say that COVID's going to continue for a little while yet this year. So are we looking at deferring more projects this year? Has there been any talk at all that way?
Mr. Kelly.
Sure, I can start, and then if Mr. Whittington wants to jump in afterwards at all. But so yeah, we've looked at when we went into the 2021 capital budget exercise, which will be presented a week from tonight. We did ask department heads to review the workload they have within their departments being carried over from last year, and also be cognizant of the financial impacts ahead of us in 2021. I can, without the report, we'll get to you by Wednesday afternoon. It's not completely finalized yet. Let you know that, yeah, staff did an excellent job across all departments of looking at projects that were not, I'm not going to call them not critical. I think a lot of the stuff we put in there, if it was a perfect world, we would go ahead and do all of the work that was planned. They did look at the ones that had an option to be deferred without impacting any legislative requirements or any safety impacts across the organization. And you will see some deferrals of projects there. The ultimate goal was to limit the amount of funding from the general levy or the tax base that's going towards the 2021 capital program, because we know we're going to need to have more funds within operations to offset some of the lost revenues. I hate picking on Sandy when I say this, but recreation in a township, a lower tier municipality, recreation is the one that's going to take a huge hit next year from a revenue perspective, and we need to find a way. So without making service cuts or drastic measures, we looked at the capital program, made adjustments within it, and I think you'll be pleased to see what we come forward with at next week's meeting on the 18th. I don't know if you have anything to add, Mr. Whittington.
Thank you. I see no further questions. Go ahead, Councillor Fetting.
Wow, you have to retrain me. We're off for the holidays and I don't know how to run Zoom anymore. Sorry about that. Just a quick question about the flood repairs. Oh dear, I scrolled here by accident. In And I was wondering what the, I think it was page 25, emergency repairs due to flooding. Just wondering what repairs those were.
Mr. Kelly?
Sure. Once again, through you, Chair Armstrong. This was a while ago, actually, the floods before COVID started last winter. I know there was some ice buildup and some damages, I believe, to the fences and in our parks areas. Ms. Jackson's nodding. So these costs were to cover repairs on those, as well as I believe we had a washout, Mr. Molyneux, on Boundary Road down in the south end of the township. So those costs would represent that. Again, in order to qualify for the Municipal Disaster Recovery Assistance Program, those costs would have to exceed 3% of our entire levy. So $45,000 unfortunately isn't high enough for senior government programs to kick in. So we have to fund that through our own means.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There are no further questions. So the recommendation is that report COR 2021-002 prepared by the Manager of Finance / Deputy Treasurer regarding the 2020 capital program for the period ending December 31st, 2020 be endorsed. Moved by Councillor Gerber, Councillor Fisher. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next item is the reserve and reserve funds. Mr. Romney.
Thank you, Chair Armstrong. Combining the two prior reports with its impacts on reserve funds, attached you'll find the unaudited reserve and reserve fund statement. This statement incorporates the various transactions that occurred during 2020, such as the dedicated infrastructure levy transfer and net levy of funding of capital projects that closed, interest accumulation, and contributions from external sources, such as development charge collections. One of the most notable items within the statement is the effect on the development charges reserve fund, with the net effects on contributions received net of interest is approximately $452,000. As such, it brings the overall deficit of this reserve fund to approximately $2.5 million. And this primarily is due to the upfront fees with the employment lands development. With all of these transactions that occurred over the 2020 year, this brings the township's overall cash position to approximately $15.3 million, including the figure of the unexpended capital funds allocated as noted in the previous report of $8.5 million. Thank you, and staff are here to answer questions.
Any questions? Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. In regards to the election reserve funds, how is it we went backwards on that one? And one other question too. I seem to ask this every year, but the building service reserve funds still keep going backwards. Do we see any light in the end of the tunnel with that?
So Chair Armstrong, I can look after the election reserve fund one, and then maybe I'll defer to Mr. Okrafka for the building one after my initial comments. So through you, Chair Armstrong, with regards to the election reserve fund, so we did start the year with $14,500 in that reserve fund. At the end of the year, we have a total amount sitting in there of $35,400. So it did increase. The difference that you're seeing at the end of the year end transfer being a reduction. We had some unbudgeted annual maintenance fees to DataFix, which is the service provider that looks after the voters list. So what Ms. Middleholtz has put in place since the last election is that we're continually maintaining and updating that voters list with an annual maintenance amount to look after it, rather than piling it all into that last year and getting ready for the election. I believe that is a proper description of it. So that's what you'll see with the cost at the end of the year that was not budgeted for. We have included a provision for that within the upcoming budget for 2021. I don't know if Dawn, if you had anything to add to that, or if...
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. Description was very close. Slightly off. DataFix, we do pay to have access to the module throughout the 4 years leading up to an election, so that we can add and remove electors as appropriate. They do not actually maintain the voters list. Was the only change that still falls with impact for the coming election. It allows us to make amendments to our voters list throughout those years. Otherwise, good description.
Thank you.
And then through you, Chair Armstrong, with regard to the building reserve fund. So yeah, we have seen this was the second part of the question. We have seen another year of a required draw from building reserve funds. Obviously, that would have been expected in this year, being a COVID year, regardless of the fact that the building activity levels were extremely positive, I thought, for a COVID-19 year. Yeah, you do see within the notes that obviously we're looking down the road when more development comes online, subdivisions and the like, which I can't predict when those are going to happen. We'll bring in the funds to create operating surpluses within the building area. Those operating surpluses then would automatically go in to replenish that reserve fund. But Mr. Okrafka, you can add on to that as you see fit.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, Mr. Kelly pretty much answered it the way I would. There is a light at the end of the tunnel in answer to your question, and it's not a train. As developments are approved, obviously there's been some delays, mostly due to COVID, but a number of long-term planning activities that have been ongoing, the official plan and the regional plan updates. But with the employment lands and 4 residential subdivisions that should be coming through the council chambers in the next, I would say in the next 12 months, maybe not all of them, but hopefully most of them, that will trigger development activities similar to what we had most of the way through 2000 to 2010 and generate significant surpluses that'll quickly put that Bill 124 reserve in the opposite direction, which is, again, the intent ultimately of the Bill 124 legislation, that you put the money away for the lean times and spend it in the lean times, I guess, too. Anyways, I don't know if that answers your question. I know you ask it every year and I give you the same answer, but we really do anticipate that those development applications, certainly employment lands, we've had some discussions with MTO over the last number of months, and it would appear that we'll be soon bringing that development back to council for council approval and then off to the region. So things are looking better.
Good news. Thank you. Councillor Fanning.
Thank you, through you, Chair Armstrong. To Director of Corporate Services, just, you know, as a general rule, I mean, all of this is what it is. This is what we spent. You know, it's been a crazy year, but I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about how and why it is that even in a year where there are shortfalls, we're still transferring to reserve funds. And I think, you know, there's often a bit of a misconception or a lack of understanding in the public about what the reserve funds are and how and why we transfer to them every year, instead of spending everything that comes in. So if you could talk a little bit about that, that'd be great. Thanks.
Sure. And through you, Chair Armstrong, thank you very much for the question, Councillor Fanning, and the opportunity to explain that a little bit. So I guess a great way to look at it is looking at the size of the capital program and infrastructure costs that the township has. If you were to look at the previously approved 10-year capital forecast from last year, there's approximately $80 million in expenditures that we're planning on over the next 10 years. In order for that to be possible, we have a mix of funding mechanisms to allow that to happen. 15 million of that 80 comes directly from our own infrastructure reserve funds. So if you look at this statement itself, it currently shows that we have total reserve and reserve funds of around $6.7 million. So looking at that in the year 2020 and over the next 10 years, we're going to need approximately $15 million in total to keep our capital program going forward. So I will note that this year's transfer to reserve funds from a tax perspective was limited strictly to the $161,605, which is exactly what we raised through the special infrastructure levy, which staff definitely from corporate services, but from all departments are appreciative of this council's understanding of the importance and criticality of that infrastructure funding mechanism and the continuation of it to ensure we have the dollars in place. Mr. Romney did make a point about the combined total cash that the township has sitting, which you'll see on our statements at the end of the year, will be approximately $15-ish million, $8 million that's already committed within the current capital programs and unspent, and the remainder within our reserve funds, which are dedicated for specific purposes. So to your point, we don't have a pool of money just sitting for no purpose whatsoever. Every dollar that's in there has a purpose for it. And actually, just to finish, the top line of that statement, the working funds reserve, which rarely is talked about, and thankfully is rarely talked about, that is what I would refer to as our quote unquote rainy day money, that when all else fails, when we don't have cash flows that we need, when we don't have income coming in the way it is expected, we have that small amount of money to help us. And this may be the first year, depending on how this 2021 budget goes, where we may have to look to some of those funds to get us through a challenging COVID year. So thanks for the question. And hopefully that explanation covers off why we continue to transfer to those reserves, even in challenging years.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, we have a recommendation that report COR 2021-003 prepared by the Manager of Finance, Deputy Treasurer regarding reserves and reserve funds for the year ended December 31st, 2020 be received for information purposes. That is moved by Councillor Gordick, seconded by Councillor Fenning. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So the next item is the Reg 2284-09. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Chair Armstrong. This is I'm just going to mute your mic there. This is more of a housekeeping report, legislative requirement for the township to advise council and the public that our budget does not include allocations for non-cash related items. This would include post-employment benefits, landfill costs, as well as amortization of tangible capital assets. So as the report indicates, the budget that you'll be ultimately approving over the next couple of meetings will not include $6.02 million of amortization, which is the accounting treatment of all of our infrastructure assets. So good thing you asked the question. In the previous report, the township is putting money aside, obviously not to that level of $6 million per year at this point in time. So it's omitted from our budget estimates. And if there's any questions from council, I'd be happy to take them at this time.
Any questions? Seeing none. Recommendation that pursuant to Ontario Regulation 284/09 report COR 2021-004 serve as a method for communicating the exclusion of estimated amortization expenses from the 2021 municipal budget. That is moved by Councillor Gordick, Councillor Hallman. All in favor? That is carried. And that brings us to the closure. So the next item is the motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Fisher, Councillor Gerber. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.